coming out as trans isn't always an easy thing to do, and a lot of times you'll run into people that are not very supportive and can be downright hostile about it. This can probably discourage a lot of people from transitioning at all because they're afraid of people judging them, people treating them poorly, having like lots of life complications just because of the discrimination. So I wanted to talk about my experiences and how I got through all of that. I came out in a weird way where I was kind of like low-key giving the signs for about 5 years before I did it. Like growing my hair out, I dyed it, I started wearing women's clothing, I started doing makeup and stuff, and I kind of like rolled that out gradually over the course of a few years to kind of like, one, to be sure for myself if like it was really what I wanted to do, and also to kind of like gauge the reactions that other people had as I started to like do it slowly over time. I was kind of lured into a false sense of security by doing that because nobody really said anything to me about it as I went through all these changes. I only got like a couple like passing remarks about it, and before I knew it, I was already like passively femme, and like just about every stranger that sees me like doesn't misgender me at all. At that point, I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to transition, and I need to start explaining that to the people that have known me forever so that they like understand that it's not just like some phase that I'm going through or something. Like this is now the real me. So I started to do that by telling probably my most trusted and closest friend, who also happened to be the pastor at my church. And he gave me kind of like a mixed reaction to it, where he didn't say a whole lot whenever I told him that I was like wanting to transition. And he kind of just like responded with a neutral like, hey, you should just like think about it, pray about it, you'll come to the right decision. And I was just like, okay, I guess that's fair enough. But then he was also like, oh, hey, and by the way, you need to stop wearing eyeliner at church. And I was like, I have also been on like the worship team playing violin with at church for many years at that point. And he was like, hey, people are getting distracted by you wearing makeup and they're complaining about it. And I was like, what the heck? Like, how does a little like line of black on my eye distract people? But I was like, I just kind of just like, okay, it's not that big of a deal. I guess I'll not do it if people are like freaking out about it. And then I kind of moved on from that, and I like kind of just continuing with the idea of transitioning. And I was like really doing it very slowly because I was really just procrastinating everything. And I was like, at this point, I was already at the point where like looking in the mirror, I was pretty happy with what I looked like. So I wasn't too worried about like making any serious changes. But I started looking into HRT because like I found that like getting on estrogen was like all the benefits seemed nice to me, so I wanted to start that. And then came this one day when I was at church, like afterwards, as I was like packing up my stuff to go home, someone walked up to me and was like, hey, I need to talk to you outside. And basically then just started like berating me for like how like the way you're dressing is a problem. This is not Christian. You need to stop this. But like just like an emotionally scarring conversation that this person just had with me. And I was like so blown away that I was just like silent. Like I just like shut down. I was like, where did this come from all of a sudden? I went home that day and like I took a picture of the outfit that I wore that day, which I'm gonna put up on the video like right over here. And it was nothing major. I was wearing like cargo pants and a tunic with a belt on, and I had no makeup on. It was an outfit that I had worn like 50 times over the past few years, and I'm like, why suddenly today is this happening? This is so bizarre. I kind of like moved on, like that was weird. I don't know why that happened. And then later that week, my friend who's the pastor, he asked me to like come out to dinner with him, which is like, we do that pretty regularly. We would hang out. And so I didn't think much of it. So I went out to meet him, and he had like a bunch of other people from the church there with him. And they like staged an intervention on me. Basically said how like I needed to stop dressing the way I was because it's not Christian and I can't be on stage at church like that. I argued with them for a good bit, but they weren't really seeing what I was saying about it. And so I kind of just like relented and was like, okay, I won't wear that one belt that was apparently a problem. That was apparently the difference between sinner and Christian, was that one belt. And I just said like, okay, I just won't wear that, I guess. And then moved on. Nothing bad really happened there for a while until I was able to get a prescription to get on HRT. And so I went to my friend and was like, I started doing this. I'm on estrogen now. Is this going to be a problem with church? And he again gave me kind of that neutral response where he's like, well, I think you should just like talk to God about it and whatnot. And he was like, at the end of the day, I'm going to give the decision up to you and trust you to decide whether you need to leave the band or not. Cool. I'm staying in the band because I like playing there and it feels good to do that. Fast forward like 3 months later, I get a call from the guy and he's basically like, yeah, you're kicked out. We can't have you on the band anymore. At this point, like I had argued with this guy many times about this topic and my views on how it relates to Christianity. This isn't the video to go into with that whole thing. Basically, we just never saw eye to eye on that, and we just had to agree to disagree. And it was so at this point, whenever he kicked me out, I was just like, I have nothing to say because I know that he's just not going to listen. So I just quit going to that church, and I haven't talked to that guy since, which is really sad because that guy was one of my best friends. He was like one of the closest people to me who like I felt like I could trust with anything and I could talk to about anything. And now it's like, because of what I look like, that friendship's just over. That was just one way this transitioning affected me. Rewind a bit, and during all of that, I also came out to my family. First person I talked to was my mom. I thought was like the most understanding one. Of all the people I talked to, she was the only one who listened to what I had to say and tried to understand as I like explained why I feel this way and why I need to do this. And even still, at the end of the day, she was very much like, I don't agree with what you're doing and I don't support it, but I will accept it. Which was like kind of like a wishy-washy response. And I'm like, okay, I guess I know like if I'm gonna change pronouns and name and stuff, she'll try to accommodate it. But it kind of like, it hurts in the back of your mind when it's like, at the end of the day, they deny like who you are. And they're just like, yeah, it's not right. So I also, after that, I came out to my middle sister, because I have two sisters. And she was the most accepting, I thought. She just understood it. She was like, yep, I support it. That's cool. Also, she's had like one of her best friends from childhood also transitioned. And so she already kind of learned like how to accept that. How to be understanding of someone who maybe doesn't look the same as they always did. So that was the only positive situation. But then comes my oldest sister and her husband, who are also very much in that like, in the church crowd, and like my sister's like a Christian counselor and her husband is a youth pastor. So it's like they're very much steeped in that, which is like, I find very hypocritical that they are so anti-trans. But again, that's a topic for another video. When I came out to them, it again turned into this huge argument. It was mainly between me and my brother-in-law, where we argued about it for like an hour about like whether or not it's a Christian thing to do. He was constantly like trying to like catch me in like logic to prove me wrong, and I just wasn't listening to anything that I had to say. It was the same conversation as I had with my friend slash pastor, where we're both like just going in different directions, and it's like I'm saying something, they're not listening to it, and they're saying something else that's totally unrelated. And at the end of the day, we just have to agree to disagree because we're not having a conversation. We're both just talking to brick walls. Although my sister didn't have as much to say about it, she still very much made it clear that she was like, you shouldn't do this, it's wrong, I don't support this. Which again, like, hurts. It's like people don't want you to be happy. It's like they're saying, yeah, I'd rather you put on this act to be a person that you're not, to make me feel more comfortable, rather than just being who you are. That wasn't even the worst of it, because then came the time when I had to come out to my dad, who is definitely the most like transphobic, conservative, like very judgmental kind of person. And for all those reasons, I barely even talk to my dad. I will give him short responses whenever he texts me, and I'll like talk to him on the phone when it's like his birthday or Father's Day or something, and that's just about the only time I talk to him. But it came to a point where I needed to tell him, because he called me one day and was like asking me for an update on my life, and so I just avoided that topic, and it was instead just telling him about other stuff going on. But then he asked me like, oh yeah, how's your stuff at church going? And I was like, ooh. And I was like, I'm not gonna lie, but at the same time, I don't want to have this conversation right now, and I wasn't prepared to have it. So I was just like, yeah, I'm not going there anymore, because I had some serious disagreements with the pastor, and we're just like not on good terms right now. And I just told him like, I will tell you the full story later, but I'm not gonna have this conversation right now, so just give me some time. And he was like, okay, yeah, but I'm worried, I want to know. And like then proceeded, he was texting me like every day after that, like, so what's going on? I really need to know what's happened. And then he just started going behind my back, and he like called my pastor, asked him, and then he called like my mom and asked her what's going on. And they're all like, it's not my story to tell, and like told him to ask me. And then came a time when I was hanging out with my mom and my oldest sister, the like not supportive one, for like Mother's Day. Again, they ambushed me in this weird like intervention thing, and they're like, you need to talk to your dad right now, because we're getting like flack from him about it, and this is your responsibility that we're having problems now. They were like blaming me and saying like, it's your crap that's causing our drama. All he did was ask you what was going on. You can just say, that's not our thing to talk about. How is that like drama? But they were like putting all this responsibility on me. Like, it's your fault that your dad's a piece of crap and he's like going behind your back. And I'm like, I wasn't ready to have the conversation. Why am I getting blamed for this? I just bit the bullet and did it, and like called my dad the next day and was like, hey, this is what's going on. I'm transitioning. I'm on estrogen now. Got kicked out of church for it. To which I had the exact same argument as I had with everybody else, where like, two different directions, just not having a conversation about talking to brick walls. At some point on the phone call, I was just like, I'm not having this conversation anymore. We just need to agree to disagree. Then like the next day, my dad texted me and he's like, I'm coming down to visit you. Like, he lives like 5 hours away. And he's like, I'm driving down there to come see you. And I'm like, well, if you want to talk about this gender stuff, then no, I don't want to talk to you about that until you can cool down about this, because you're like in a rage over it. And then he was like, okay, that's fair. We won't talk about that. And I was like, that seems suspicious. I doubt that that's true, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and trust him. So like a couple days later, he comes down, he shows up at my house with his wife, and he's like, they immediately just break out into like accusations and reprimanding and just like telling me that I am selfish, in rebellion against God, unstable, and not in my right mind, and I can't be trusted to make decisions, and that I need to get help. I could go on and list all of these awful things that they were saying to me, just like screaming at me right here in this room, like on that couch. It just went on for like an hour, and every time I tried to speak, they would immediately like yell and talk over me and interrupt me and prevent me from saying anything. It came to the point where I just sat here and I was just silent, because I was like, they're not going to listen to what I have to say. I'll just be silent, because I can't all I can do is just wait out the storm. And then at the end of it, they were like, oh yeah, and we know that you own a firearm. Yeah, you can't be trusted to have that anymore because you're gonna hurt yourself. They stole my handgun that I had, and they were like, yeah, you don't deserve to have this anymore. We're gonna take it. They're like, yeah, we don't like your decisions, so we're just gonna do something to hurt you because we don't like you now. I could have really argued with them and fought on that, but I'm like, I'm just so sick of fighting people over this thing. So I was just like, yeah, here you go, take it. I'm not dealing with this right now. That was kind of the extent of this. And now since then, I've like, my dad texts me like all the time, just telling me like, hey, just reminding you, you're a man. Through all of this, I've just like learned truthfully like how hurtful it can be to transition and have people not support you. And it becomes kind of like a constant fight with these people, and it's like it's the conversation that keeps getting brought up even after you've agreed to disagree about it. After all that, you might think, is it even worth it to transition? If it's so bad and like relatively few people are supportive of it, like why even do it? To that, I kind of like I thought about it and I was like, you know what, no, this is worth it. Being all of these things that have gone wrong, at the end of the day, I look in the mirror and I'm like, that's me. That's me. I'm not putting on an act anymore. I don't have to feel the stress of like, people are going to find me out. People are going to find out my secret that I'm not really a guy. And I live like free of that stress now. Even though like everything from outside is like coming in and attacking me over it, I feel like inside, I don't have that struggle anymore. I'd rather fight something that's outside than fight something that's inside. My advice to anyone like transitioning themselves and finding themselves in these situations with unsupportive people, you can't change other people's views. If someone's going to be judgmental and unsympathetic and not want to understand you, you can't do anything to make them understand you. As I've learned from all these like many arguments that I had with these people, at the end of the day, like they're just going to have their views and they need to choose to listen to you to actually like change their mind. And if they're not going to choose to listen to you, then you shouldn't bother explaining yourself, because this transitioning is not something that you need to defend. It's not something that you need to justify to other people, because it's you and it doesn't really affect them. Sure, they have to look at you, but they can choose to look away if they really hate it that much. I'm kind of glad I went through this struggle in a weird way. So there's this thing, I think it's called like the button test. It's a hypothetical question where you have like, you say you have this button right in front of you, and it's like if you push that button, you will permanently and unreversibly become the opposite gender, and it will retroactively change the past and all of your like family and friends relations and stuff for them to have always known you as that gender. So it's like a seamless change with no trouble whatsoever. And would you push that button? If the answer is yes, then you're probably trans. I found after all of this situation, I would not push that button. Not because I don't want to be a woman, but because I think this experience of the transition process, of like seeing all that negativity, experiencing real life discrimination, has taught me so much about the world and made me so much more sympathetic to all other sorts of people like me, and people in similar situations like other minorities that experience racism or other sorts of discrimination. Now, like, I understand and I get what it's like for people to treat you like crap because you look different. And that experience, I don't think I'd ever want to give up, because that's now a part of who I am. And so it may have sucked, but at the end of the day, I think I'm happier. Also, I think I'm wiser. Yeah, that's kind of my whole coming out story that I didn't really get into. There was some positive stuff. Like, I have a lot of friends that like I told about it and they were like, cool, we totally accept it. And like, was nothing. But I obviously, like, since that went well, there's not really much of a story to it. TLDR, transitioning, it sucks, but it's worth it. Anyone who's watching this, if they found it interesting or helpful or they hate it, I don't know, give me a comment. All that, like, you know, YouTube algorithm stuff and whatnot. But anyway, that's my story. See ya!